Welcome back to United TV. We're going to be looking at Mateus Fernandes to Manchester United, or maybe Mateus Fernandes plus about 20 other players to Real Madrid, if you believe a lot of the stories coming out there. I'm joined by JB from the United Devil channel to talk about this story. And to be honest, it's actually quite good to get someone else on it because there's so many different things going on. It'd be nice to get a fresh opinion. But welcome to the channel, JB. Great to get you on.
Thank you, my friend. And yeah, I'm really pleased to be here and can't wait to get into the yet more 100 players that we can talk about today. So cheers, Rich. I appreciate it.
It seems to be relentless, doesn't it? I was going to say that to start off with, the big story about Mateus Fernandes is that Manchester United, it looks like it's our number two target in terms of like order of what deals we're going to get done. We like fly to London. There's talks going on, and how enthusiastic are you about Fernandes to start with? Because we'll go into the story in a second, but there's a lot of interest from other clubs. What do you think? How positive are you about this as a midfield signing for Man United?
I really like the player. I think there's a spin a little bit that because now we've been priced out of the market, it kind of like happens a lot whereby if we can get him for a cheaper price, he's a fantastic player. The moment it goes over a certain price, then he's like the worst player. I mean, for me, 21 years old, PSG apparently they are in for him as well. I actually just think he's a fantastic player, and I think he's the sort of player that we should be after, like the next world class player before he becomes a world class player. So I'm quite excited about it and quite chilled as well.
No, I think when we're talking about transfer towards the end of the season, my reaction was like he's a really good player. If West Ham get relegated, hopefully you can get a better deal, but it's not necessarily the case. I think a lot of people were guessing what clauses he's got in his contract. And I think from West Ham's point of view, it's probably in their interest to delay it somewhat because transfer fees tend to go up a bit. There might be more interest from other clubs. I think Matheus Fernandes has indicated that he would prefer a move to Man United if he stays in the Premier League, but we have to be realistic and say interest from PSG, interest from Real Madrid. Now, if that's genuine interest, that's quite a big factor. So in terms of like this, I read a story. I think I spoke on your channel last night, and I said that Manchester United have made a conversation, had conversations with his agent, etc., and the club for about 6 weeks. And it looks like Arsenal's interest and PSG's interest is maybe somewhat like behind that. They just registered interest. Do you think this is a case of Man United just getting like? Is there a cap which you would go up to, or do you not mind about the price?
Okay, so I think every player has their cap. Now, I suspect here, are we being played by the Hammers? And I don't blame them for playing games. They want 80. I think one of the issues that they've got is there's a sell-on clause of 15%. So obviously, whatever they get, they've got to factor that in. So I think, first of all, I think this is a dangerous game that West Ham could be potentially playing. But I think there has to be a cap. I mean, I would be happy with 65 to 70 because I just think that if we believe in this player, then when you factor the deal over 5 years and then you factor the wages involved, it's a relatively cheap deal to do because then after 5 years he's going to be 26 years old. The amortization is done. So even at 75, I think the value is there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but based on like the bigger signings in terms of, I don't think they're bigger in terms of like necessarily 100% better, but the most expensive signings out there, you've got to look at Elliot Anderson. If he's 120, like just say that, can you see value in 120 or like 100 for that deal? Would you look at that as going to be acceptable considering maybe he is on the younger age as well? Like, what would be your top price for someone like Elliot Anderson?
Okay, so for me, the thing is, and again, I bore people on this all of the time, is you've got to look at the whole deal. So, it's yes, whilst the price is high, the wages are going to be high as well. So let's just say you do it at 125, he's going to want 300k. It's a total commitment of 205 over 5 years, as opposed to Fernandes, the total commitment could probably be in and around, say, like 100. And is there a big gulf? Is he worth half the price of that player? And I don't think there is. So for me, it's not just about the actual fee. It's about the amortization. It's about the total cost, and you've got to look at the total cost. So for me, an Anderson at £200 million over 5 years compared to maybe like 100, I would go with Fernandes.
Yeah, I think that's an important point as well, that people were asking about, so the Gordon situation at Barcelona. And my thoughts were the same, that if you look at the salary demand and you look at this, like we could be looking at a similar sort of salary to Tchouameni, that sort of range. Whereas if you say, for example, you're looking at, say, Tchouameni, who's already on a big contract at Real Madrid, you start looking, and actually Tonali as well. When you get a player that's going to be, say, 26, 20, 25 to 27 age, they're looking at one big contract. I think with Mateus Fernandes, this is a massive step up from West Ham if he goes to Man United, or if he goes to Arsenal, Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid. So for him, it's probably about proving himself over the next few years. And I think with this one, a lot of it is, I think Mateus Fernandes is a very promising player. And it's going to be about how does he get to the next level? Because then that will be when he gets like a very big contract if he's at Man United. So I think it's definitely. I'll say this though, I do think also that £80 million for me is too much. I have said that, but
Agreed.
everyone's going to have a different view on what's too much. My guess was going to be that I appreciate West Ham's position because they need to get the best possible price. If you look at the financial situation they've got, he's their best asset, isn't it? So it's a bit like if you're selling things privately, you've got one big. This is West Ham's chance to make money. So I don't blame West Ham. If I was West Ham, you don't sell quickly, do you? You get the best possible price.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. I don't think they want 80 million. I don't think they do. I think this is a game where it's like when you set a price for a house or a car, always start high, and the buyer starts low. So I think we've gone into lowball them, and I do think a fair price for this player is probably in and around 65 to 70 million because we are paying for the future potential. We are. So I'm comfortable with it. I know people see that as 70 million was quite high. But as I say, again, when you compare that to some other players, I actually think that's a reasonable deal. And it is quite cheap. It's still cheap for us to do. And it just means that we have the ability then to go and buy bigger and better players as well.
You can say welcome to a few people as well that from JB's channel. Welcome to our community as well. Great to get you guys on board, and it'd be interesting to get your opinions. I feel something similar as well in terms of it's difficult to sit here and say what's a good deal because in 2 years' time it might seem an excellent deal because you might have got a player that's really done well and improved a lot. And I think that you've got to also look at we're paying a bit for the future as well, aren't we? And I think for me, when I saw West Ham relegated, my thoughts were based on I'm looking at market value as well because we have to guess what the market's going to be doing this summer. And do you remember last year when Gittins went for 60, Alanga went for 60, and I'm looking at thinking I think this is going to be. I think Fernandes has got a higher ceiling than those players, and I think 70 feels steep. But I was going to say I thought 60 could get the deal done. If it goes slightly over with add-ons, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it because I think it's going to be factored into. For me, it's like this is a 10-year plan. Like you get Mateus Fernandes, could be here for a decade. So I think, can you imagine a 26-year-old Mateus Fernandes playing at the top level with literally nothing on the books for him? So for me, that's a positive. Worst case scenario is, worst case scenario, he goes to Madrid and we just go, thank you very much for a huge amount of money, possibly.
Agreed, and I think that is the model that Ineos want to operate under. And I look, whether we agree with it or not, can you imagine if we win a League or two? I'm not saying that will happen, but imagine if we win a League or two, we sell him to Madrid for 150 million, and then we go and get the next player. So again, I'm not necessarily comfortable, but as you say, if we get into those positions, which is what big clubs do, because big clubs do sell, then I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah, as Sky says, relegated clubs should not be asking for 80 million. I think it depends on. For me, this is like supply and demand. Like there's one Mateus Fernandes. There's a few big teams want him. I think this is just West Ham testing the water. We've seen this like story time and time again with like big fees put out there. Until a deal happens, I think there is going to be some sort of value where, like, if they ask for too much, he will be gone. I was going to sort of switch the focus onto, say, Real Madrid. If people talk about media hype and coverage, Man United gets plenty of that for sure. Real Madrid might be the one club that takes it to a different level. And we've had some, JB, you probably used the word crazy with some of the stories coming out that I think Perez has said. I read this and I was joking before we started the stream about all the promises made before Brexit. This is like an election promise, is it? So Real Madrid have an election campaign. Perez has pretty much said, don't worry, guys, I'm going to buy any player you want in the world. And the fans are probably loving it. Man United fans are probably thinking, I think the first reaction I saw was Paris Saint-Germain saying, you're not getting our players. And the next one I saw was, I think Bayern Munich are also thinking hands off our players. So, what do you think about the Real Madrid start? Because that, for me, that suddenly exploded over the last sort of 24 hours.
Well, for a club who wouldn't pay for Mbappe, they had to wait until he was basically free in terms of a fee. Also, as well, they've gone after Haaland. So I know, is it Riquelme, who is the other guy's basically gone after him, and has even put Haaland on the back of a Madrid shirt. City have gone absolutely crazy, and apparently are going to sue, which I find an ironic thing there. But yeah, I mean, I just think that this is it's just politicians. I mean, Elise, why would he be sold? I mean, he is one of their best players, and can they realistically get a player to replace him? I don't know. Fernandes could be an option for them, but if you're going after Vitinha and you're going after those players, all I'm saying here is, are PSG going to sell their best players to a rival? My answer to that is probably not. And if they do, they're going to go for massive money. And can Madrid, do they have the funds?
No, exactly. Paris Saint-Germain, I mean, we kind of know the backstory of Paris Saint-Germain. They're not exactly scraping around for money, are they? So I don't think they're going to be. The way I look at Paris Saint-Germain is this could be their legacy in terms of they could win 3 Champions Leagues in a row. That puts them up there with like Ajax, Bayern Munich, teams in the 70s. And I think this is something that Paris Saint-Germain have needed for years to be taken seriously on the world stage. So there's no way I think Paris Saint-Germain will let any player under contract leave, even for crazy money. And actually, the Bayern Munich owners have themselves come out recently and said that they will not sell any single player from their club for any price at all if they can't get equal quality or better. So, and I think it shows that for some clubs, then it doesn't matter how much you offer them, they need those players. And if they lose them, because I remember I was gutted when Cristiano Ronaldo left Man United. You could not buy, it didn't matter how much money we got, we could not replace Cristiano Ronaldo with a better player, and our team regressed. So I can see what they're saying. For me, there's not as many standout world-class players as there used to be. And if you've got a game changer in your squad, I mean, you've got to keep him in terms of my view.
And this is what, and the thing is, this is what elite clubs do. This, we all want to get back to the Champions League. We all want to, win leagues. And this is what elite clubs do. They keep their best players because they don't need the money. They need the players. And all they care about is winning the trophies. And I think you're right. I think the PSG thing here is, yes, they've got to operate under squad cap rules. But let's just be honest, they're going to keep the best players. They don't need the cash. And that is what elite clubs do. And hopefully one day we will get here again.
Hopefully we'll be at that stage where we're turning down crazy money for players that are too good to sell. Unfortunately, at the moment, we've got Agate, Xerxes, and I don't think we're fighting off Real Madrid, sadly. I'm going to go through a few of the comments because it'd be good to get your view on this one. And let's say I'll go for a few quickly. Yari says Fernandes' market value is 34 million, so you double it and get what Man United will most likely pay, which is like high 60s. You could be quite accurate. So United Strand in the comments was saying that Fernandes gets dribbled by quite a lot, so doesn't rate the player as much. And I think in terms of this one, I'll go for a few of the comments as well, saying that Brighton apparently rejected 70 million for Van Heck. So why wouldn't Fernandes be more expensive than him? And a question from Daz saying, what's Anderson Fernandes Belieber actually done to warrant the money when you look at someone like Wharton, who's been around a bit longer and potentially he could be cheaper. I think with Wharton, he might be cheaper because there's an agreement that he would be allowed to go for a certain price. So that might be a gentleman's agreement. That's all I can say regarding that one. So I'm not sure. I just say welcome back to membership for United Side Die as well. Thank you for supporting the channel. Really appreciated. So what do you think in terms of when people say why is Fernandes going to cost that amount of money, and you've got Belieber, or why does he cost that much money, and compare him to someone like Wharton? What's your view on the valuation?
So I think you are spot on. I think the reason is because there's not a clause in there. Second of all, the market value. If you look at midfielders and the prices of players now, I think 60 is probably the old 30 million for players. I think with time, I think prices have increased, and I think we've almost got blind to it a bit. And again, with a Wharton, as you say, I think there are clauses in the contract. But what West Ham will do as well, they'll point to the deals that we've done, and we're almost a victim of ourselves, is because we've paid for Cunha's, etc. And I know they're not the same position, but they'll point out those deals. Also, as well, the market. If you just look at the market for centre midfielders, and they also know we're desperate for players. I think the combination of those three is why you're seeing these players at the prices. You almost need a contract, as in a clause in the contracts. I think those three combined is the reason why now you get players who are relatively unproven or young at these prices.
I think also, like when you're looking at the transfer market in the past, you look at someone like Caicedo and you look at Declan Rice, and they go for 110, 116, whatever it's Caicedo cost. And I think what you're seeing is, like, if you're buying a house and someone knows that you're going to do a little bit of work to it and get a big profit, the price of the house goes up. And I think with football players, it's like if you buy a player from the Championship, you pay a certain price. 1 year in the Premier League, you're probably adding 20 million to that price tag. And I think someone like Fernandes, if we could have got him for 60, he could be someone that if he has a really good season in the Premier League, you could then be adding like like Anderson. Anderson would not have been talked about in terms of £100 million transfer 12 months ago. And it's for some reason it does seem to be that it's not my view, and I don't think it's most people's views, but the price is going to be pushed up because I think West Ham look at it and think, well, will he be worth 100 million in a couple of years' time? And we want to make sure we get maximum out of this one. As I'll say, thank you to Bilal for supporting the channel, for renewing your membership. Big up to you, Bilal. Always great to have your support on the channel. And please subscribe to the channel if you are new, and also check out JB's channel as well. Really good channel. And there is a link in the video description on this. And so in terms of jumping back to Real Madrid, Mourinho, do you see this as something that, like, there's a lot of stories out there, and this comes from like Real Madrid sources. So again, Man United are not putting out too much information. I think agents at this point in time in the transfer window, a lot of information is coming from either agents or sources close to clubs that just writing content. But Mourinho does apparently like him. What's your thoughts on how serious this interest is? Because I think the interest from PSG and Arsenal is is definitely real, but it might be that Man United feel ahead of those. The kind of weird thing with Real Madrid is the links with Vitinha and Neves at PSG. I don't think those players are leaving, so I don't think PSG will sell their players. So I can't see a domino effect where PSG want Mateus Fernandes to replace players that are leaving. So I still think it might be Man United likely. But how serious do you think there is an interest with Real Madrid?
I think they probably are, and the reason is because they do like a value target. I think there's this consensus that Madrid, they go and spend like they used to spend on players. I think those days are done. I think the signings that they've made over the last 5 to 6 years would prove that a bit. And I think he is that sort of player. I think he is the sort of player that 60 million, again, if Madrid are in and around that, you must know that A, he's a good player, and B, he's reasonably cheap. I do think that they are there at the table. And the worrying thing is, as I said, on my channel, is that I do believe that at the moment this is our deal to lose. But then, to be fair to us for the first time, is that I think West Ham are trying to move the goalposts, and I think they are trying to get a bidding war in, because I think if they wanted to sell for 60, 65, I think this deal is done now. And I do think they're encouraging Real Madrid to get involved, and I think they probably are. But I still maintain that Fernandes wants to come to us because of Fernandes, and I think those links are quite strong. But Jose's Portuguese himself, right? So I think if we don't get this deal done, I think we could end up in a little bit of a war.
Yeah, no, United's Strand. I know you don't agree on my views with Fernandes, and so you don't rate him. That's absolutely fine. I respect your view if you don't rate the player. And he said if we paid 40 million for Fernandes instead of Ederson, then a good deal. I think that given like market value and like they paid 40 million pounds. Like West Ham paid 40 million pounds for him anyway, so it would have to be more than that. And there's a sell-on clause, so it'd have to be again more than that as well. But I think they're different players. I think that again with Ederson you get more experience. I think. Do you think? Like because Ederson was the first deal, do you think people then are expecting the second deal to be maybe more of a household name? And I mean, I know a lot of us have watched Fernandes for a while, but do you think that people were hoping that the next deal would be like a Galactico style signing? Because there was media kind of speculation, wasn't there, that Man United said they're going to make one statement signing or flagship or however they phrased it. And do you think that that's something people are hoping to get?
I think yes. I think it depends on who you listen to. So I think it's come from Chris Wheeler originally, and I'm not saying that's like anything there, but he come out and he did say tier 1, 2, and 3. And the problem is with this club is it puts out spin at times, but then sometimes it backs itself into a wall. If you listen to Fabrizio and on this sort of stuff, he has already said we are looking between 1 and 2, which is completely different to what others are saying. Now, I personally, whether you like them or not, I would always listen to these guys because they get the information from the club. So they've always maintained that we'll either get 1 or 2. And I think again, this club, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We expect the best, and I think we need to come to this conclusion at times. Is this look? Are we that club anymore? Is there anything wrong with these players? Now, what makes a Tonali at 100 better than this player? And I know people will have their opinions on it, but do we need to be led now by the data rather than what we told the price is? Do we need to be led now by the data as opposed to the price? And does somebody like Fernandes fit in better than like a marquee signing? Because if you go and buy one player, and I think that the important thing here is that whilst I completely agree that we need elite players, is 1 or 2 players, elite players, going to fix this side, or would you rather 4 or 5 potential good players so we build out that squad? I think that's probably, for me, is the question.
It's a good question. I think with United's strategy, my thought was that you need to definitely bulk out the squad a bit. The squad's a bit too thin for a Champions League campaign, a Premier League campaign. Like we know that we reduced the squad last season, more players left than came in, but the quality of the players that came in for me was good. And I think what we're looking at is we don't know the budget, but we assume Man United have got a decent amount of money to spend. Let's put it that way. And I think if you're looking at the difference between Fernandes and Tonali, or Fernandes and Anderson, or Alex Scott and Tonali, and you look at this, I think what Man United are looking at is there a massive drop off that means that we can, we have to spend the extra? So I would say this, that over like previous years, there's been players when Man United were linked to Rooney, or Man United were linked to probably Rio Ferdinand. There's been some times where I've gone, right, it doesn't matter what it costs, we get that player in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with this one that I couldn't say that about Tonali. I couldn't say if you don't get Tonali, it's going to be a disaster. But I think he's a very good player. I think it's just the wrong circumstances. Where not Newcastle United want too much money. I think he's very good, but I think you have to look at it and say, what options are there available? I quite like Alex Scott, and I know he's not an exciting option for a lot of people, but he is also. I was talking to a Newcastle content creator who does a bit of scouting, and he was very positive about these players as actual replacements for Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle. And he said these are the sort of players. And his kind of opinion was, and this is a neutral opinion, he said, I think Man United are actually starting to do the right deals. Like these are the sort of deals that are more sustainable because if we bought Tonali, then our team improves and it's a good signing. But in 4 years' time, are we actually looking at, do we need to replace Tonali? Whereas Alex Scott, Tchouameni, and also Fernandes, if they kick on like we're hoping, they're 25, aren't they? And I would be looking at thinking, oh, we got another like 5 years. We could then maybe invest in a centre back or a right back or a striker, and we can build our team that way. So I'm kind of open minded. I know people have different views, but if there was a player like Roy Keane on the market now, I'd be saying get that guy in. But I don't see there being like a signing where I feel like I have to sort of like start protesting outside Old Trafford to get that player in. I think I'm kind of open-minded at the moment.
Agreed, and I think one of the things as well is that where I think we'll see the marquee signings is going to be next year, because I think people, and again, it's so boring for people, but we've got to realise that this year, for example, we've got to pay out 238 million quid. This is why I believe if we get the right players in, this is why I think if we qualify for the Champions League next season, the season after, then I think that is when we're going to see these players. I think as a fan base, I think we expect the elite. And as I say this every single season, and not because I'm an idiot, I say I expect us to win the league. I expect us to do X, Y, and Z because we need the standards up. We're not that team. We're not in a position of an Arsenal where we just need a singular player. I would, back in the day, that's why we would buy one or two players, because we could do that. I think we're in a transition whereby we do need elite players, but we also need a team. Let's get a team first and let's continually progress. And then I think if we do qualify for the Champions League, maybe next season, the season after, I think that is where you're really going to see the spend. But I think we just need to build a team. And I think we need to have these realistic conversations. I know people don't want to necessarily hear that, but I think that's the position that we're currently in.
Yeah, I'll answer a few of the questions in the chat. And United Strand is saying that with that view, in 4 years' time, we need to replace Kenyon and Bremo. It's possible. It is possible. We might need to replace one of those players. But I think with that in mind, that Garnacho left the club, Rasmus Højlund left the club, and I think Man United looked at Cunha and Bremo, Benjamin Sesko as really obvious signings to effectively get goals into the team in the very short term, because the priority had to, like last season, the priority had to be getting to Champions League. And I think Cunha and Bremo were players that would definitely have an impact straight away. And I think that it's my view was like last season, you had to improve rapidly. This season, we got Cunha and Bremo, we got Sesko, and we have to look at maybe each year there's a slightly different priority. I think the difficulty is going to be, we bought really good players in the attack, and they cost 60 to 70 million pounds. If you want to buy like the best available midfielders, you're looking at 100 plus. So it's difficult to, like, we can't say let's buy Caicedo, Declan Rice, and Anderson, because it's like 300 plus million. So I think this is effectively, there is a budget. I know, like JB has said as well, that you have to consider the size of the squad. I saw a really good comment actually from Jules, who I think summed it quite well. And one is going to be like, in terms of building, you build a team first, and then you can sprinkle in the star quality. And I think, do you remember when Liverpool got to Champions League final, their goalkeeper messed up, Gareth Bale overhead kick. Their response was to get Alisson and Van Dijk, and they went from not competing to winning 2 major trophies in a couple of years. I think Man United could be. I would say we've got an Arsenal. I think Arsenal probably needed more star quality last season in the transfer window. I don't think they necessarily got it, but I thought they got there in the end. But I think Man United's kind of like, I think people look at Dwight York, Robin Van Persie, Jaap Stam, and they're players that are brought in with the idea of we're going to win next season. But Man United aren't in that place at the moment. Maybe in a year's time, you can imagine actually, JB, maybe in a year's time, Man United, if we finish like, I don't know, second or third in the league, or third or fourth in the league, and you look at our team, think really, really good. but we just need a goal scorer or we just need this winger, then in that case, I would probably say, yeah, if there's one out there and he costs 80, 90, get him because it might be the it might be the game changer we need at that point.
And I think what's skewed the season as well is that I think, and if you've got any like Arsenal fans in here now, then like maybe put your fingers in your ears. I think he's probably been one of the, some people will say worst, some people will say the most competitive season. But I don't even think Arsenal had in previous seasons, I don't even think they compete. Because don't get me wrong, I think their squad is good. But again, I think this season's been such a strange season that if the teams that we expect to get better, I don't even think Arsenal have even got that team yet. I know they brought in, as you say, some players, but compared to, if you compare to the City season when they won in Liverpool or got like 97 points and they didn't win the league, like this Arsenal team is nowhere near that as well. So I think we need to take stock really of where we are in the league. I don't even think the league's going to improve that much next season. When you've got Liverpool to consider, I mean, they're in a bit of a mess. Chelsea are in a mess. City is zero. They're going to be in a bit of a pickle as well. So I think we have got an opportunity here to, if we strengthen in the correct way. I'm not saying that we're going to win the league, but I think if we play it right, particularly in this league, which I think is going to be a very, very similar league, I think we could do pretty well next season.
I was going to say, regarding like Stephanie's comment, then I think with Arsenal, if I was an Arsenal fan, I think they need to get more scary attackers for me. That I thought watching PSG against Arsenal, that if Man United are playing against PSG in that final, I think we cause major problems on the counter attack when the game opens up. And I think Arsenal are a bit too conservative. They got lucky with consistency, but they don't frighten me as a team. The things that used to worry me was that when Holland was on form, he was like one of the best players in Europe, and he just pretty much steamrolled through teams in the Champions League. I think Arsenal is super consistent, but to be honest, when they had Thierry Henry, I used to look at them as like, wow, that's a proper team. I think they've got, for me, it feels almost like they've got a George Graham team, and you need someone to come in and go, right, here's your Thierry Henry, here's your Bergkamp, and like maybe get the front ticking. So if you drop Bruno Fernandes into Arsenal's team, they might be talking. But I think at the moment we're lucky that they don't have that level of quality. And I think actually they haven't really addressed it in recent years either. So I think maybe Man United we are addressing our weakness where we have no midfield. So we're looking in the right direction as well. Jim says if we have to pay off a bit more for Fernandes to fend off Real Madrid, I am okay with that. That's what big teams do. That's pretty much what we did with Yoro, isn't it? Like Yoro was Real Madrid was sniffing around, and we paid a bit more.
And but again, we need to be careful there. I mean, I still think he's young. I still think he's got a lot of room to grow. I know people get frustrated, but I think people need to understand he's so young. I think Rio didn't come into the club till he was 22 or 3, and you look at who like he played with. I think he's still a young kid. Have we overpaid for him? I don't know, but the danger is obviously when big clubs come in and they push you to pay the more money. I don't mind doing it, but I just think sometimes we've got to be careful.
True. Dan says he'd be shocked if Carrick didn't want Wharton. Do you think with Adam Wharton, like Man United pretty much said about a year ago that they saw Wharton and Belieber, or maybe 18 months ago, as actually really like perfect signings for what they were doing then? But my thoughts were that the Liverpool interest has meant that Man United are not really going for certain players they feel that are not going to come to the club anyway. It's like prioritizing in terms of, for me, I don't mind that strategy. If the clubs certainly, they'll know more information than I do. If they feel that the player does not have a realistic chance of choosing Man United, you have to look at other players. You can't really, you can't hope they change their mind. And I think he's going to go to Liverpool probably. And I think that's why United are not pushing that. I think he's a very good player. Like Wharton for me is a great signing, but I don't think he's interested in coming. That's probably why we're not talking about him.
Agreed. I think that's exactly it, because I really like the play. I just think that he's just a bit. I think people underestimate the signing a bit because I don't hear too much now of him being spoken about. And I think it's because we're all resigned to him. He's going to go to Liverpool. But, I still think there's going to be a bit of a sting in the tail. I think we could go for somebody maybe at the back end of the market if there is an opportunity, and they might surprise us. Then because I think Wharton is going to be available. I think from 65 to 70 because I think there is that clause in his contract as well. So I think we watch that space on him. And there's just something about him.
I think he's he's gone under the radar a little bit, I think, but I do think Wharton's a really good player, and it's someone that's maybe got a better range of passing, someone that's going to be slightly more creative than players we're looking at. So I think he would be a really good signing. The question is like whether Liverpool definitely go for him or not, but the price apparently the price is about, like I said, like I've heard 60, 65, you've heard 65, 70. For me, that's actually a pretty better deal than some of the players we're looking at. DHEX has got a comment, and I did mention a little bit about Alex Scott this morning, that saying, and people will have different. The thing is that people will have very different views. Like my views, JB's views, everyone in the chat will have different views on which players they prefer. And he says Alex Scott is just as good as Fernandes. Says as good as Fernandes, but different. And I've heard people say that Alex Scott keeps Bournemouth ticking over. He's like their metronome. He does lead. And again, Bournemouth are a very well organised team, so I think the whole team has actually looked good this season. But he would be potentially available for about 50 to 65. There's rumours that Liverpool might test the waters with a cheaper bid. And I actually thought maybe like a few days ago that Man United might look at Fernandes, Alex Scott, and then that might give them the money to go for Lewis Hall. Maybe they're looking at, will the budget go that way and get three midfielders and a defender for the price of two more expensive midfielders? So I was looking at it in terms of like, how does the budget work? Do you have any thoughts on Alex Scott? I mean, he'll probably be talked about a bit more, I guess, as the transfer window evolves.
So I think with Alex Scott, and again, I've seen people trying to push this out there. We're not even negotiating with club to club yet. So I think that needs to be said first. And I think they haven't put a price on him either. And they're trying to get him tied down to another contract as well. So those are the things that I've heard. The thing is, I think with Alex Scott is, yes, don't get me wrong, I think he's a good player. Is he as good? I think it depends on how you like your players to be. But again, I think he's going to be in and around 60, 65. Because I look, these young midfielders who are good, they know the bigger teams need the midfielders. So I think for me, there seems to be this rhetoric again that we're going to be able to walk into this team to get the players for 40, 45 million. And he might be worth that. But I think at the moment, as much as I like Alex Scott, is he going to be worth 65 to 70 million? For me, right now, from what I've seen, I think he's one of those hipster players. Don't get me wrong, I think he's good, but I do think he's a little bit of a sort of hipster player I think people have latched onto. And again, nobody knows. Nobody knows if he comes to a bigger club. And this is the question as well, is of all of these players, who's going to be able to handle the pressure? Because I don't think these players know what it's like to play at this club, and the pressure will be immense. So I think my question would be, who has the mentality as well to come into this club?
The only issue I've got with Alex Scott is I think that Bournemouth are so well organised and they're such a good team and everyone knows their roles and they've been organised very effectively under a good manager for a number of years. My question is going to be like, if you drop those players in and they have to do something different, is it going to work as well? So I don't know. I think he's very good, but I think he's not the top priority for United. If Liverpool make a bid for him, we'll have to see what happens with that one. But I think there was a couple of comments like Andy says we'd be silly not to go for Wharton. I think that if Man United don't bid for a player, honestly, I think it's because they don't feel the player is going to be considering moving to Man United. So I think I was trying to say that this morning as well, that Man United's transfer policy this season might be quite boring and less headline grabbing than it has been in previous years, because I don't think we're going to see. Do you remember when we had the Branthwaite situation a couple of years ago, and you have the Embremo situation where it's bid number one, bid rejected, bid number two, bid rejected. I think with this one, it's going to be loads and loads of behind the scene chat, and then literally here's the deal. I don't think we're going to see. I think Man United are boringly efficient in doing deals behind closed doors now, and we're not going to hear about it until it's a done deal.
And I personally prefer that, right? Like, I prefer my goals, if you can get, for example, if you can get a striker to score from that much out, I love those easy goals. And the same as if we don't hear and we're efficient, I want it simple, easy, and we only know when the deals are done. So I'm more than happy with that. I think it's the pantomime. I think it's the whole. I think fans enjoy that, and there's nothing wrong in that. But I actually would prefer we just know when we've signed players. It's efficient. We get them in. The fan base is a bit quelled, and there's no like arguments. And I would much prefer to be that way. But I appreciate the pantomime of the window.
I think Man United, the people at the moment, they don't want that, do they? They want to keep things a bit behind closed doors. That's why, when you see a story and it says this is our main target, part of me is thinking, is that their main target? I don't think Man United would be advertising who their main target is, because it might, if anything, push the price up. So a lot of people have said to me, Rich, like Man United said that Anderson's our main target. We should be like a big club and get him. And my thoughts in the back of my mind are, if I wanted to buy something, would I walk around telling everyone in my village or town, like, I'm going to buy this, and then go, right, then try and negotiate a good price? Because for me, that would be insane, wouldn't it? If I go around saying I'm going to buy this one football player, and if I'm from Nottingham Forest, I go, good, we're going to put an extra £20 million on the price. So it might be that that's our top target, but it wouldn't make any sense. In the same way that to go to Real Madrid's stance, if Real Madrid want to sell Tchouameni, they're never going to say they want to sell Tchouameni. They're going to replace him, and then he's going to move on. So to kind of switch a little bit towards potentially like Real Madrid story, do you see any? If Real Madrid do start buying players, and again, there's a lot of links with lots of different players, do you see any scenario where Tchouameni does actually move clubs? Because I keep saying I think it's very, very unlikely, but you never know. Real Madrid have done crazy things in the past, and they are looking at bringing a lot of people in. So could you see there's a scenario where he is actually going to be leaving the club?
So I think it depends on presidential stuff. So I think if Perez gets back in, I think he stays. Tchouameni himself has already said that he would like to stay at the club to win things. Now that we all know that doesn't mean a lot of stuff, right? I think that yes, I think there is good potential. I mean, I've seen other people say that it's a done deal, etc. It's nowhere being near a done deal. It is just not. Do I think we've even spoken to the player? I think we have spoken to the player, but for it to be said that it's a done deal, now, do I think realistically that it can get done? No, I think we need to almost take a step back and say, do we trust Wilcox and co to go to one of the biggest clubs in the world and convince a player who's playing in Spain? Spain is warm, is hot, to go to one of the biggest clubs, Champions League, every single year. They'll win it. The league, he's playing with some of the best players in the world, to come to England to play with a Luke Shaw. And it's not a dig at Luke Shaw, but to move away from that and to come to a project whereby the club doesn't even qualify for the Champions League every single season. And I think it's a hard sell, because also he's going to want 350 to 400k. We used to do that. We don't have that now. So are we going to be able to convince that player to come on the wages that he's on now? And I'm just not convinced. I'm just not convinced.
No, there's so many factors in it that don't make sense. That Man United, they might want to play like that, but they don't want to pay that sort of salary. It would be, I think, when people look at the price, people might look at the price of Tchouameni and guess that it could be cheaper. But when you factor in the salary demand, Tchouameni is probably the most expensive signing we can do, I think, with transfer fee plus salary. And I would say that then you might look at Tonali might be the second most expensive, then maybe Anderson, depending on how the transfer fee. But potentially this could be quite similar. So I think when people look at Mateus Fernandes, it's probably a lot cheaper in comparison, which is cheap is a bad word to use because it's still crazy money, but it's a lot cheaper over the long term than a deal where you're going to have to pay 250, 300k, etc. salary. I'll just say with Don in Spain as well. I think a lot of stories are agent driven these days because a lot, the agent's job is to make the player hyped up. And do you remember? You might have covered the Gyökeres story last season, and there was loads of information on a newspaper called Ebola in Portugal.
Yeah.
And they were basically just getting information from the agent, I believe, or the agent was just every other day. It was like Man United are going to make a bid. Like Man United were not going to make a bid for Gyökeres because Gyökeres had not indicated he wanted to join. But I think it's that a lot of these stories now. I was start looking at maybe some traditionally credible journalists, like some of the Italian sources seem to be quite good regarding what was happening with Edison. And I think a lot of recent journalists have maybe, when you were saying before, like about a lot of hype and spin. I think the people that are doing a lot of hype and spin, there has been some stories that some clubs are trying to deliberately not leak information because they don't like the stories that have been put out there.
And I agree with that. And I'm a lot. Just to be clear here, I'm not a Glazer fan. I'm not I'm not the biggest fan. But it doesn't mean to say that. Look, you need to have a balanced view, right? And I actually think I think more than ever, I think the spin is partly coming from the club because it does. But I actually think the spin this year is coming more from the agents because don't forget the agents want their fees. They want their players to move. And I agree with that. I think this is spin. And go back to the Tchouameni point as well. Do I think this is agent-led? I do. But I've seen people think that we're going to get him for 70 million, right? Why is he not going to be 100? Because he's 26 years old. He's in his prime. Why isn't he going to go for 100 million as well? So there seems to be this, again, perfect spin on players, money. And I think this is agent-led this season because I do think JB loves Sir Jim. Switch has been naughty.
That might be a very short list of people that love it. I think no one really trusts Sir Jim, but we're kind of like stuck with him at the moment. That's what I'd say.
Agreed. So yeah, so I think a lot of this season is agent-led.
I think 100%. I read something. I don't know if you read the same article, and it was talking about it was quite overly financial, so it wasn't for everybody. And I know you quite like financial stuff, so you might have seen something. And it was about contracts and about confidentiality. And there was definitely some evidence. I can't remember which players they were talking about, but there were some players where if the transfer fee was, say, £60 million, right? The club gets £60 million, deal gets done. But there might be some evidence where if the club was able to take £80 million or £90 million, then that player would actually get a percentage of anything above 60. So there would be an actual financial incentive for the club to get them. So if you're looking at this, like if Anderson goes from extra money, Nottingham Forest benefit, probably Elliot Anderson benefits. Man United don't. City certainly don't either. And so for Anderson, when he says, I'm going to decide after the World Cup, it's just about making more money. He knows where he wants to go, but it's almost in his interest. It's a bit annoying because we know what this, and if City don't want to pay for him, fair enough. And if Man United, well, I don't think we should overpay just because City pull out the deal. We should still look at it in terms of like, if it's a sensible deal for us. But I think there's definitely a lot of things that go on that we don't really know about, and I think there's a lot of annoyingly for agents and for the players themselves, it's in their own interest for the transfer fees to go high. So it's a bit annoying. And maybe with Mateus Fernandes, apparently I think he might have put in a transfer request or it was rumored. So I think he wants to leave. And I think he would be happy to leave quite quickly. But I think for people like Anderson, he just wants to he's going to get some money out of this, which is a bit annoying, but fair play. It's his one chance to do that. I honestly think with Tchouameni, I don't think he wants to leave. And I think the only way he's going to leave is if Real Madrid go, there's the door, Tchouameni. It feels like he'd have to be kicked out of the club. And I can't see that happening with a player of that quality. If it does happen, then we're still going to have to pay a lot of money. But I'd imagine even if Real Madrid saw him as a player they're going to move on, they're not going to tell us. And so I still say it's going to be very, very unlikely regarding that one.
And to go back to your point as well, the best example of that deal was Haaland. Haaland went to City for something, was it 50 something or other? And apparently there was a payment made. So the official fee was like 50 something. And then there was another 30 or 40 that City did behind it. If you look into the transfer, that is such a
I think
dodgy deal.
didn't his dad get 20 million or something like that? I think it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at it, and it's like you can call it kickback, and you
Hmm.
can call it whatever, or you can call it agents fees, but it was a
Hmm.
pretty much like he went for something like I read something like 60ish, but like 50 to
Yeah.
60ish, and it was one of those fees where you go, how is the player that good going for that sort of money? And then all the money associated with that deal to get it to happen, it was obviously money going to his dad or his agent or other things. So again, I think when people look at that deal, a lot of people at the time were saying, look at the deal City are doing. And I was thinking, that's not the real figure. Like if they went through the books properly, then we
It's going to
start
be more
looking at.
than 115.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be like Haaland's going to be over 100 million easily. His salary must be disproportionate to what's been reported as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, Brown Envelopes FC. I mean, what's bigger than an envelope? It's more than an envelope, isn't it? It's like I'm getting like ideas of like Germany in the like kind of inflation period, like wheelbarrows of cash going around. That's what I'm thinking.
I agree with that. I just, you know, like, I'm heavily involved in like the figures and stuff, and and I've got a really good grasp and understanding of all of the figures. But even there are some other things that that go on behind the scenes that even the most in tune of finance people will just be like, I can't. It's cooking the books. It's cooking the books.
No, it's just one of those things where when people say we need to be run like a proper club, I was thinking what
That's
they need
it.
to do is they need to make Man City and Chelsea play by the rules to start with, and then we can see who's like running the club properly. But no, it's very difficult. Brown briefcases. I don't think briefcases are enough unless you're printing like extra zeros on the number on the on the pounds on the notes. But it might be close to that one. A quick question from like Gregory. He was saying about selling the club, etc. And there has been a lot of stories regarding that one. Then, I mean, 115. You could probably put a zero on the end of that one as well, couldn't you? That's like, maybe there should be a stipulation that they have to add 150 million pounds to every transfer fee. That might stop them
I
for a
agree with
bit.
that.
What do you think with takeover talk? Like, is this just there's something in there because it's coming from Bloomberg? There's
Mm,
credible sources. But are we going to see anything? Do you know what? I'll say quickly, there's a World Cup coming up. There's massive hype. There's
mm,
lots of rich people. There's lots of investment. They're
mm,
fleecing fans to watch the games.
mm,
It might be a good time for them to get investment. So it might be the timing.
mm. So I've covered this quite a bit, and I've covered this today actually. So I think there are a couple of parts to this. I'm going to ramble on for a little bit. I won't go on too much about this, but I think there are a couple of things at play here. And I think the biggest thing that I think people need to understand about this club is that the Glazers are here for the money. There is no more cash to come out of this club. And why is that important? Because they take money every year. There is no money left to take. So if you're one of the Glazers who are, you don't have an interest, if you're sat on an asset and it's not going to earn you any cash, they might as well take it out of the club and put it into a bank account. They will earn more money from a bank account, right? So I think it's come to a conclusion whereby the Glazers, I think there's six of them. You've got Sleepy, you've got Doc. I'm kidding. But you've got six of them, and I think at least three of the six, possibly four, like we're not making any cash. We can make at 33 per share because I think that drops down February next year. If they can sell it now, take because I think one of them can earn £500 million to sell their shares now, and I think they're seriously looking at that because there is no cash. Now, the secondary part to this is going to be power. Now, the problem is that the Glazers as a whole have the most of the power. From an individual perspective, they've got their own percentage shares. Now, the moment that three or four of these sell, Sir Jim has the most power, or whoever comes in or buys the shares could potentially have that power. So I think this is a combination of the Glazers are fighting each other, and it's a power control as well. So I think this is very, very real.
Yeah, that says they're making money. I think they're making money, but if you're looking at if you've got that much money tied up in the club, then you could make more money in the stock market. You could make more money in other investments. So they're making money, and they're taking money at Man United. But it is, but I think a lot of the revenue coming into Man United is obviously huge. But then you've got the debt, you've got debt interest, you've got rising like player transfer fees, and I think cost in football is also going up. So I know the prize money is going up, but a lot of it's going to players and agents and other people. So how much money can you take out of the club? If the club's like, say, if the club is worth 5 billion and you had 5 billion in other assets, I think you could make more money than a football club. I know they're taking out a lot. They've taken out a lot of money out of Manchester United, but it's difficult to predict, isn't it? Because I don't know what's going to happen. Do you see a situation where some of the Glazers can sell, some don't sell? Because there is definitely a split, and it might be 50-50, but I know there's like 6 siblings, they don't all agree.
I think yes. And I think, I think it really does depend, because Sir Jim has no say really when it comes to a full sell, but he has a say when it comes to a part sell. So he's got clauses, etc., in there. So I mean, I think this is going to be a very interesting thing. I almost imagine the Glazers sat around a table and they're almost arguing about, if we leave, etc. I do think that part of them want to leave. And yes, I know they make cash from the club in like other ways, but the whole point of them, let's just say they make some money, right? Would you rather sell your stake, £500 million stake, take that cash out and earn it in other ways? Or are you going to keep it in? Yes, you're probably going to make X amount, but it's not going to be as much as if you lift and shift £500 million. So I think that's a very, very attractive proposition for those who, because don't forget, yes, they make cash elsewhere, but in terms of the club, you've got an asset that's not doing anything for you. And we all know that the Glazers love a pound note. So I think this is real. I do.
So I was thinking that a lot of people are suggesting that, or they think that Man United are going to wait until, or the Glazers will wait until a stadium's built. And I was thinking that could be quite a few years and require significant investment to then. It's almost like, if you think about it, if you can sell a house for, I don't know, £400,000, for example, or you can wait a couple of years and spend some money on it, and then hope you can get 600,000. It actually might be worth taking 400,000 a few years earlier, depending on where you guess the profit's going to be and the amount of money it's going to cost to extend or to modernize. So I think it might be not as. And a lot of people think the stadium and redevelopment of the area, but again, if that gets pushed back to 2030 or 20, like even further, I just think that at some point that we're not talking about people in their 20s, are we? We're talking about people also that are relatively impatient billionaires. I mean, billionaires aren't. I'm not the most patient person. I think someone with like $500 million tied up somewhere else is going to be relatively impatient as well. So I don't know. Like Gaz says, he can't see a full sale. I honestly don't know. So I could see the Glazers, like some of the Glazers staying on, but they're going to not want to relinquish control, are they? I think the main thing about them is power and control, and there's no way they could own like a tiny percentage of the club and have all the voting rights. Who's going to put billions into a club and have no say in how it's run? That's going to be difficult.
And I think to that point as well, I think there are a couple of options. I think option one is that the remaining Glazers buy out those shares and then they release a couple of B shares to get the funding in. I think that is an option. And then I think option two is that if the Glazers do sell, so 4 of the 6 sell, and the remaining 2 don't want to buy or can't buy, it almost forces a sale because they need investment. Unless Sir Jim then comes in and says, look, I'm going to buy the rest of the club. If that doesn't happen, they're almost forced into a sale. I think this is fascinating. I mean, can I see a false start? I'll give you my view as to what I think could potentially happen. Is I think what the Glazers are looking for is ideally is almost not an even split, but I think you could end up with a triple threat of the Glazers, investment, and Ineos. I think that is what they want. They want investment to come in, bankroll the stadium, and pay for everything. They'll take a smaller share, but I think the Glazers just want as much cash as they possibly can. If they can get somebody in to fund the rebuild, they'll be here for a long, long time. If not, then I think they might be forced to sell because there is no more at like now there is no more large cash chunks to take out of the club, and that is the problem that they got. So they're going to need investment, in my view, for the stadium, because without that, they're going to leave.
Yeah, it's true. And Gregory says one comment saying he was talking about this with some other people as well, saying, where would you find someone with the amount of money to buy it? I think you're looking at incredibly wealthy groups that would have that sort of money, but it kind of limits it, doesn't it? But someone's not going to put billions into a club and not have control over it. That the only reason they're going to do that is to get control over the club as well. Is it still true? Like, I can't remember what the date was now, but if the Glazers get is it an offer of £33 million a share? No, sorry, £33 a share. They can force Ineos to sell, or they have to match or be bought out.
So,
Is that
so basically, how it works is they've got that clause in there, which doesn't expire. So people think that clause expires. So at the moment, it's basically there's two parts to it. So the first part is they're guaranteed the share price until next year, till February 2027. And then after that, as long as the Glazers have the majority ownership of the club, they can still force him to sell, but force him to sell at a lower price.
Yeah, Gal says he hopes no one comes in to help them with investment again. So I don't know what the best case scenario is. What in an ideal world, JB, then what would you like to happen? So I know that obviously you want the Glazers gone, but what would be the best resolution that's somewhat reasonable or somewhat likely?
Okay. So for me, in an ideal world, I've always said this, I would love a fan ownership or the fan to own it. So I'd say 51% to the fans, and then someone else, because you would need a business consultant or somebody to come and help. The problem with that is you'd have top reds and you'd have all that stuff, and people would argue, right? I think that is what I would like, but I don't think that can happen for a number of reasons. Qatar, Saudi, look, I'm not going to get too much into the human rights stuff. I mean, is that ideal for me either? The answer to that is no. What I would love to see is I'd love to see somebody like a Sir Jim to come into the club, get the debt clear, and we do it the correct way. We live off the things that we earn, and we're owned in the correct way. That is what I would love to see. What is the best option at the moment? The best option is, I think, somebody to come in and clear the debt and just clear house. I think that is, until that debt is gone and until the Glazers are gone, and Sir Jim, in my view now, is complicit in that, and unless he buys out the whole club. But as of now, I just think the whole thing needs to be cleared out and start again. But if that doesn't happen, then what I'd like to see is maybe somebody like, and it pains me to say this, somebody like the Saudis or somebody with cash who is going to come in, get those shares with the intention of pushing people out. I think that is kind of, I think, best case as of now.
Yeah, no, my preference has always been that someone can come in, run the club debt free, essentially try and do what happened 20 years ago, have the club running where you don't have debt, you don't have debt interest, you have a good functioning stadium as well. That's something, unfortunately, the Glazers have made it more expensive now because you've got to fix the stadium or get a new stadium. And Man United makes money. It makes a lot of money. And if you're not taking money out of the club in dividends and you're investing in the squad, it should be sustainable. And I don't see this being like, I don't think we need to have someone come in and pump money in every single season. Like, that's not how United used to do, like, sensible transfer policies. And to be honest, and this morning there was a lot of debate about looking at hidden gems and things like that. So maybe this would be like, are you good for like another 5 minutes or so?
Yeah.
So
I'll go for it.
my question is like transfer strategy. When I'm looking at what we're doing at the moment, a lot of people will go, right, we need to spend big, we need to get experience. And do you think the hidden gem thing is something that Man United are doing a little bit, but maybe not so much in terms of like you've got Aiden Heaven, Dorgu. I'm trying to think of other examples where we've got a few players in that aren't quite as expensive. We wouldn't necessarily do those deals all the time. I think Cheeto is one that's speculative, Orozco, Leon. So these players, they're not going to make much of an impact in the short term, possibly apart from Dorgu and Aiden Heaven. But that's something that I think when you go very, very speculative and very young, you probably don't even realize if you've done very good deals until 2 or 3 years later. So for me, I think that's something you should do every year. And regardless of what happens to those players, worst case scenario is you make some profit. Best case scenario is you get an Aiden Heaven for 1.5 million. That's a really good deal. But are you happy with that kind of like mixed sort of transfer policy? I'd describe it as, where you try to do some experienced players, some like Fernandes, who's quite expensive, but is going to be good for the future, and a few cheap speculative deals that, to be honest, we won't know if they're going to be good deals or not.
Now see, that is something that I do like, and again, I'm gonna go back to the past. The reason why we've always been able to do that is we've always had a bed of players. So if you were the likes of a Ryan Giggs, or if you were the likes of a Neville's, Scholesy, but when you came into this squad, you had the support. So you had the likes of a Keane, and Ince, a Kanchelskis, Pallister, Schmeichel. So we had that ability to be able to take a chance on plays, to bring those players in. What we're trying to do now, we're trying to buy a first team, and we need those players in place. Now, once we have that, then I would agree you can then go buy a Javier, like Hernandez, like a Forlan, and then you bring those in, because it doesn't almost, because you've already got the first team in, and I think for every position you almost need 2 or 3, and that's why we were so good, is because you had that mix. And I think that is the right mix to have. You have the senior bed of players who are experienced, and then you start to bring in the next ones, say like they're the 21 or 2 ready for the next step. They then learn from the senior pros, and then you bring in the youth as well. So I like that. I'm a massive fan of you bring in, players who are ready for the next step. You then bring in the youth players around the place, and then it's almost, you create a scenario then where once those older players leave, you've got the next crop through. So you've always got a cycle of players. I think our problem is that we're just trying to build that team of Giggs, of Ince, Kanchelskis, etc. first. But what we do is we just go, right, let's put someone in who's 20 years old and expect them to be the finished article. And this is not the club to do that. So yeah, I agree. I'm a fan of that, but I think we need to build the foundation first before we try to build the roof.
I think Chelsea have gone too far. Chelsea have gone too far with buying too many young players. And I would say that it used to be the same. Actually, I'd say Arsenal did that with when they had, I'm trying to think, Arsene Wenger was in charge. They went very, very much in buying younger and younger players. And what happened in the end was like Man United and Man City just poached them when they became mid-20s. And we got Van Persie a bit older, and they got, I think, Fabregas left to Chelsea, etc. So they got a lot of their players poached. I think with Man United, I do agree that the thing that worries me a little bit with a lot of fans is this expectation that people can walk out the academy straight into the first team. And unfortunately, because the first team's been quite poor, it has been a possibility. I'd love to see, what I would like to see is actually a very functioning first team, so that an academy player comes in and they've got loads of experience. Like, you have someone like, as an example, I'm trying to think who would come into midfield, but you'd have maybe like someone like Scholes come into midfield, but you'd always, Brian Robson would have just left. You've got Ince, you've got Keane, you've got top quality players in that position. And I think it's the same as like coming into a back four where you've got Pallister and Bruce and you've got Schmeichel in goal. So it feels like, for me, Man United, we've got a credible goalkeeper, but we need to get a lot of experience into our team. I don't mind actually having Benjamin Sesko, because you've got Bruno Fernandes, you've got Cunha and Buemos, you've got that experience there. And that's why I was saying I would get Lewis Hall, because I think we still got Luke Shaw at the club. So a little bit of overlap for me would make a lot of sense. So I think it's going to be frustrating. So final question before we wrap up today. Do you think in terms of like based on what a lot of comments have been saying as well, do you think that regarding Edison's coming in, Mateus Fernandes might be the second one, that it's a bit of speculation over the third player is, do you think are we going too young with a lot of our signings, or do you think this is absolutely fine? Because you look at, say, Alex Scott, Fernandes, Tchouameni, that is pretty young midfield. So do you think we should be looking to try and get someone like Tonali or someone like hold out for Tchouameni because you want that experience, or are you happy with what we're doing?
I'm relatively happy in terms of the ages, but we absolutely have to get the centre midfielder to replace Casemiro. I think has to be experienced. I do look. It doesn't mean to say you look at Alarmins, right? Alarmins. I've got to say this. What an absolute! Just I can't believe how good he is. Like I knew he was going to be good, to the point now where he's the third most valuable keeper. He's gone from whatever we paid for him, 20 to 50 to 60.
Yeah, I saw that.
That is the deal. Those are the deals that need to be done. I think the midfield, the defensive midfield position, or that number 6, is so pivotal that I do think it needs to be an elite player. Look, you can't have, in my view, you can't have a younger player in unless they are mature beyond their years. Fine, but I think we absolutely fundamentally have to get a experienced player in there. Look, I'm not saying it's got to be a super elite player. I think it has to be experienced. And my worry is Edison is that player. Now, look, people are going to have their opinions on that. And my fear with him is it's the unknown. I don't know how good he's going to be. So, in my view, the reason why I would go for maybe a Tchouameni is because I don't know enough about Edison, and I'm scared he's not going to be the player that I think he is. But there's no guarantee that a Tchouameni is going to work either. There's no guarantee. So, I think we need a very experienced player in there. But what's experience? And how do we know? I think it's just a gamble.
I think he is a bit of a gamble. All I can say is that people that watch him like him, and people that watch Angelo still really like him. And at the back of my mind, it's like I honestly I have no idea how Edison's going to do. People say that he's going to surprise people, and he might do that. But it's difficult jumping into the Premier League at any age. So it's difficult to see how effective he is. I think we'll find out relatively quickly if he's a good signing or not, because I think it's you can sometimes tell, can't you? I imagine that it might not be amazing to start with. And just before we wrap up, just quick thoughts on Mateus Fernandes. Do you think that the couple of years he's had in the league, and maybe like Eddie Anderson, do you think that's enough experience as well? Because we're not talking about the Champions League experience of 3 of those players, are we? So I know people love Anderson, but he's not been playing at the same level as someone like Tchouameni.
So I think Anderson is one of those players that, because he's played for England and will play, I think that I'm not saying that that's the same as the Champions League, but I think the pressure playing for England, and he has had some European experience, I can see-ish why they kind of want the money for him. But Fernandes, for me, look, I like him. I just think if he is going to be the main, like the marquee signing, I think it's going to be a risk. Has he got the experience? I don't think anybody has got the experience to come and play in our midfield. I think we are a very unique club, like a Madrid, like a Bayern. I think unless you've experienced those teams, I don't think anybody is experienced enough to come into this club. I think people underestimate what the club is. So unless you're a Tchouameni, I wouldn't even put Tonali in it. Well, maybe I would put Tonali a bit because he does play for Italy and he has played in the Champions League and he does play for a pressurised club. But Anderson, I wouldn't even put him there because I don't think he's done that either. So I think there are very limited plays. The 2 marquee signings, Tonali to Tchouameni, I think those 2 are the ones I think you could put in there, and they've got that experience to handle it. Outside of that, it's a gamble.
Yeah, I think it's a gamble. I think there's definitely loads more to discuss over this in coming days and weeks. But I'd say massive thanks to JB. and I'll put another comment in the chat and after this video finishes. So make sure you check out that channel. And thanks for giving it your time. There's obviously lots to talk about. We'll do some more collaborations in the future, I'm sure. And I think we'll probably end up talking about similar things, but maybe maybe this will be done deal next time we speak. You never know. Things could be moving quite quickly.
Thanks, Rich, and I appreciate it as well. Like, like it's always nice, I think, sometimes to have two people. I know, particularly because we do the channels ourselves, and sometimes I get sick of just like hearing my opinion. So it's always nice to bounce things off of people as well. So I appreciate it, and thank you to the chat as well. So
thanks everybody for chatting. Also, a few people that have come over from JB's channel. Thank you for getting involved in the chat, and that's appreciated. And there is a calling show tonight that Bilal, you were asking about that. So it'll be a bit shorter because I don't. Friday night I might be doing other things apart from talking about football for once, but it might be like a 7 to 8 show. So if you want to come in, it will be like a calling show. Thank you, JB. Thanks everyone in the comments as well. Really appreciate the comments and questions. And we'll both see you guys later on different channels. So check out JB's channel, check out me at 7 p.m. and we will speak at that point in time.